big presentation, you know, that's when you have recognized the guest, and I don't have to say anything anymore, right? So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here tonight. We haven't realized how small our institute is, but now we definitely think we have to find another address. But of course, you know, there is no, not an ordinary day, you know, when you have guests like this. So usually, I think the space is quite sufficient. But I just want to ask you from the very outset, do you know that this is a literature event? It's not a rock concert, right? Because usually we are used to have so many people at the rock concert. But hey, our guest has always wanted to be a rock star. So now I understand he has always been a rock star when he sees such a great public coming here tonight. It is indeed a very special evening. Yeah, it's crowded, but let's hope that we will find 1 hour, 1 and a half, maybe more of conversation to be not that complicated. From the beginning, I'd like to welcome two guests who, brilliant in their own right, are not here because they must, but because they are great readers, because they love literature, they love culture, and they have always been supportive to the Institute. And of course, I'm referring to Ambassador Cornel Feruță, our ambassador to the United Nations. Thank you, Ambassador, for being here tonight. And of course, Consul General Simona Florea, who's always been so supportive. Thank you very much. Your Excellency, thank you for being here tonight. You know, there are very few instances in the life of a cultural diplomat that he or she is able to offer events like this. And tonight is, of course, one of those instances, one of those events when you have two wonderful guests. Yes, there are launching events, there are book signing events, and there is an event with Mircea Cărtărescu. Yes, there are writers, good writers, excellent writers, brilliant writers, and yes, there is Mircea Cărtărescu. In fact, tonight, we don't have only Mircea Cărtărescu, which is already something very important for us, but we have, I must say, the most successful duo working today in literature in the United States, because together with Mircea Cărtărescu, we have the one and only Sean Cotter. And you may think of famous partnerships in literature, in, I don't know, in mythology, whatever. Trust me, you are now seeing the most famous partnership working today, most successful in many respects, and definitely one of the most fruitful partnership Romanian literature, Romanian culture has had here in the United States. Of course, Mircea Cărtărescu is very difficult to present, to introduce. Probably for sure, the most translated Romanian author today. For sure, the most awarded Romanian author today. For sure, the most recognized voice and even allure in among Romanian authors everywhere in the world. In fact, the map of his launching events, of his books being translated, looks like the map of the world during Alexander the Great. So everywhere you look, there has been an event with Mircea Cărtărescu, or a book has been translated, or something, you know, a PhD is being written, and so on and so on. So we are very, very honored and grateful that Mircea, who is very busy, is in a residency program at Columbia University, has taken his time to be here tonight with us. Thank you, Mircea, for being here. In fact, this is the evening of like big name superlatives because we are very, very happy to have here as well Sean Cotter. There are many translators of Romanian literature in the world. There are not very many in the English-speaking world, but for sure, when you look at what's happening today in the world, you will tell immediately that Sean Cotter is the most successful, most influential translator of Romanian literature working today. A professor at the University of Texas at Dallas, with a lot of important prizes for translation. He has done some of the most amazing translations from Romania. In fact, when he's not around, I call him Mission Impossible Sean, because, you know, come on, he has translated Matei Caragiale. You cannot find a more difficult writer in Romanian literature. I myself, I'm reading him with the dictionary by my side, because otherwise you wouldn't understand anything. And he has translated this book, you know, brilliantly, and it's extraordinary, it's amazing. And of course, Mircea Cărtărescu, he is not necessarily below that level, but of course, you know, another difficult writer. But he has done it like no one else. Yes, he's daring, he's courageous, and he's also, and we'll talk about this, he's also a thinker of translations. He's also thinking of the process of translation. He is, I would say, a philosopher in his own right. So, ladies and gentlemen, Sean Cotter. I promised Mircea before this event, because you grew up in admiration of the American rock stars, that we will try to do an event that will look very much like you know, meeting your favorite rock star. When I see the audience, I think we are on the right path, but he will not sing, and neither will I. So gentlemen, thank you very much for being here tonight. I would like to start by talking a little bit about the influence of American culture on your writing. You often talk about how influential authors and in general the American civilization has been on your development. But you came here when you were about 34 years old, not earlier. Had you been earlier, and had America not been an imagined country, a country of books, of authors, of lines, of beautiful pages, do you think you would have had the same development, the same attraction, the same rapport with the American culture?
Definitely not.
I swear it's one.
Okay, I hope so, because my voice is not as it used to be. But first, before answering your first question, and not before thanking you so much for your fantastic presentation, you made us, or maybe, I don't know how Sean is feeling, but you made me feeling just like I wanted always to be a rock star. You are right. I always had a guitar at home, but I never learned to play. I think I would have given my skin for being able to play the guitar on a stage in front of a huge audience like it is now. It's absolutely fantastic that so many people gathered here to listen to us, to listen to some voices who will be happy to talk about themselves and about literature, and mainly about poetry, because poetry is the most wonderful subject in the world. So after I thank you for the great and undeserved words you had, words of appreciation you had for my humble work. I will start answering your question. Definitely not. I am not only a product, and I'm proud of it, of the Romanian literature, of the fantastic history of the Romanian literature, of the huge writers that we had. You mentioned Matei Caragiale, but let's only talk about poets. In my opinion, the Romanian literature is a literature of poets, mainly of poets, great poets, starting with Eminescu, of course, and going on with Archesi, a second great poet, fantastic poet, and then with Ion Barbu, Blaga, Nikita Stănescu, whom Sean Cotter has translated in English, and many others who, of course, influenced me a lot. The second circle of my influences were, for sure, the European writers. From the very beginning, starting with Plato and Aristotle, starting with Sappho, starting with Anacreon, starting with Catullus, to the medieval literature and the Renaissance literature, Dante Alighieri, who is the greatest of them all, in my opinion, and Shakespeare, and all the others, till the people who were really absolutely necessary for my development, the classics of modernity. I mean Thomas Mann, I mean Dostoevsky, I mean T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, and so on, many others. At first, my literature was very European. It was a literature which I could characterize as modernist, a modernist literature, on the trail of Nikita Stănescu, for example. I was very fond of him, and I imitated him because a young writer is a monkey. He or she feels the need to imitate, just to get some skills in literature, and then to be able to become herself or himself. But at a certain,
they have the chance to be.
If they have the chance, and if they were really born artists, because you cannot become an artist, you have to be born an artist. All the artists know this little secret, Polichinelle's secret. That's why I'm a bit reserved about the courses of creative writing. From such a course, even if they are extraordinary courses, there are as many writers coming out from that course as they get in. So
more nor less.
Yes, no more nor less. But when I entered the Faculty of Letters in Bucharest, that there was one of my greatest chances in my life. I met there, as Allen Ginsberg would have said in other contexts, the best minds of my generation. I met my extraordinary colleagues. I met the great critics that were building the Romanian literature by that time: Nicolae Manolescu, Eugen Simion, Gelu Ionescu, and Ion Pop, and many others. And I could develop myself under their eyes, which was very important for me. And my colleagues were very much in front of me as knowledge of modern literature, where I was a bit more provincial by that time. So the other colleagues of mine from my generation, like Traian de Coșovei or Florin Iar or Magda Cârneci or Mariana Marin, they knew much more literature than I did by that time. And I learned from them a lot. And at least the first two of them that I mentioned were very much connected to a huge continent that I had no knowledge of by that time, the huge continent of the American literature. And I learned from them. I learned literature from them. I learned poetry from them. I learned that not only Federico Garcia Lorca, not only Giuseppe Ungaretti, not only Gottfried Benn, not only Lucian Blaga were writing a great poetry, but there were also huge poets, of course huge writers, but now I'm referring mainly at the poets, huge poets writing an extraordinary literature in the States. The difference was very much because the European poets, including the Romanian poets, were rather abstract poets. They were rather intellectualist poets. They used metaphor as the most important tool in poetry, while the American poets wrote about the real persons, the real life, the real life. They were writing about what happened actually with us in each and every day. They wrote about their friends. They named their friends in their poems. They wrote about gas stations. They wrote about the streets, the bars, the traffic in the streets. They were very, very realistic. And when I start reading their poems, I mean the poets from the American modernity, like Carl Sambor, for example, or Carlos Williams, and of course the San Francisco school, the big generation, Ginsberg, Ferlinghetti, Corso, Snyder, and so on, and of course Frank O'Hara, Charles Olson, and many others. I realized that it's possible completely another kind of literature, faster, stronger, and much more connected to the life as we all know, as we all experience. It was like shifting from tennis on grass to tennis on asphalt. This was our feeling. We were trembling to start writing poetry in that meaning, in that way. And my generation, the generation of the 80s, or the generation in blue jeans, as it was derogatory called at a certain moment, we learned to breathe the air of another world of literature, another world, another experience, another sensibility. And it was very important for us.
And you once said that even the way you dressed, the fact that you wanted to identify with this culture, on the first book that you published, the collective volume Aer cu Diamante, you are pictured in wearing jeans, looking like young Americans.
Yes, and looking like the people, even like the people today, because we were actually the first generation in the Romanian culture that we were not formal in dressing, in mentalities, in our psychology, in our philosophy in a way. We wanted to be everyman, not scholars, not poets with big P, writing poetry with big P, and so on. we wanted to mix with the people and write about them.
I kind of know what you are saying about the creative writing seminars, because by the irony of destiny, at 16, I found myself in a creative writing course with Mircea Cărtărescu. And I entered in a certain way, and I exited the same. So yeah, I think I know this feeling. Sean, I think we are very lucky that a young Peace Corps volunteer, instead of ending up somewhere in I don't know, in Central Asia, somehow got to Romania, and then that young Peace Corps volunteer, found Romania, discovered the language and the culture, and now became Sean Cotter.
Sean Cotter then too.
So Sean, tell us a little bit about this relationship with the Romanian culture and Romania, and then tell us how the working relationship and the great friendship, I would add, started between you and Mircea.
It's a story about an accident. That I was a Spanish teacher. When I asked to go to the Peace Corps, I put my application in, and you go through. The process took about 15 months. And being a governmental organization, they have a certain logic. So they said, anywhere but Latin America, we will send you a Spanish teacher. And so the first thing they wanted to send was to Kazakhstan. And that might be a very nice place. I hear that's where they tested the bombs. I've never been. And I went to, the next option was to go to Bucharest. And there I just felt immediately at home. I was a pretentious young man, and I wanted to know about literature, and I wanted to know about ideas. And when I got to Romania, that's all anyone was talking about. That this was, people were talking about Liceanu and Pleșu, right? Just walking on the streets. I'd go through Cismegiu, and I'd see these young men talking very seriously to each other. And it wasn't Liceanu and Pleșu. But everybody just seemed to be kind of swept up by ideas and by poetry and beauty. It was all there, and so how could I not be seduced by that? How could I not be caught by that? And so when I came back after Peace Corps lasted a little over 2 years. When I came back to the United States, I really wanted to find a way to integrate that experience with my experience in the United States, because after all, this is where I'm from. And translation was that method. Translation was the way for me to try to say, these things that happened to me when I was speaking Romanian, maybe they have a connection to things that happen to me when I'm speaking English. Maybe I can start to map those experiences onto each other and see what happens. And this is what's happened, right? I get to sit next to the most interesting person I know. This relationship started through publishing, right? I think we tried to meet at one point. We tried to meet early days at FS Pub, if anybody knows the history of Bucharest pubs. This is no longer there. I think it's now McDonald's, right?
It's the fate of these pubs.
It's the fate of pubs, right? It's a shame. And as an American, I apologize for McDonald's. But we tried to meet. We'd set up this meeting, and I went there, but we didn't arrange how we were going to recognize each other. And so I decided I would just look like an American, and surely that would help me stand out. And so I went in there, and I had my bag, I was wearing jeans as though that were unique. Now, of course, we're talking about the blue jeans generation. And as I went in, I tripped on the tile on the doorway. And I didn't just trip, I tripped in the most spectacular fashion. I was in the air for probably 3-4 seconds, right? I was kind of moving around. People in the bar were turning their heads. Everything was in slow motion. And for a second, it was like I was the angel of destiny, just kind of in the air. And I came down with a smack. Like, imagine a sperm whale landing on the ground, right? Imagine anything big and fleshy, and that was me. And knocked the breath out of me, right? And I got up and I looked around. Nobody cared. And I couldn't see any poets. I've been blinded by my collision with the ground. And so I think that Mircea was there. We established this later, but somehow it just didn't work. So it took later for me to start working on Orbitor, The first volume of Binding, which is about 11 years, published in 2013.
How did you arrive at Auditor? I mean, you had always wanted to translate something from Mircea, or just happened also by chance?
I mean, a little bit of both, right? I mean, obviously, Mircea was already very famous when I started going on the path of translation, and I did want to translate something, and I was just kind of doing job after job, doing work after work, developing my skills, and then a publisher came up to me at a conference, Jill Schulman from Archipelago Books, and she asked me if I would do first the Senescu book and then Orbitor. So that was my great fortune. I think that she'd been at a dinner party and someone had whispered in her ear, effectively, and then she went up to look for a translator, and there I was.
You know how history is made, right?
These small chances, right?
Yeah.
Flipping a coin.
Yeah, but I think we are very lucky that it happened the way it did. I really want to retract what I said at the beginning, that we have, guys are the best, and it's superlative. I want to retract that. There is something that is even, I think, bigger than that, and that's the literature itself. So I think it's time we read something from Mircea. I would ask Mircea to start by reading something in Romanian, because we definitely want to hear how the beautiful language sounds in the mastery of Mircea, mastered by Mircea. And also then I'll invite Sean to read something from Solenoid, right? Because they can always surprise us, they take out some poetry or some other translation, but all are good, so don't worry.
Yes, we'll be reading only from Solenoid tonight, this evening, because it's easier than to try to read from several books, and because I think Solenoid is enough for making an impression. I will be reading a bit more, only for the first time. And the other two fragments that we prepared will be read directly in English by Sean. This is a small parable. There are several parables in the book. Mi se năzărește uneori că am fost cândva într-un vis sau într-o altă viață un maestru al tatuajului, atât de abstrus și de pur, încât nimeni niciodată n-avea acces la minunile de dantelă, tuș și durere ale artei mele. Încuiat în camera mea, singur în fața oglinzii, îmi acopeream pielea cu mărunte, strâmbe, încălcite, fantastice, arabescuri, asemenea liniilor de la Nazca și rețelelor supurânde produse de râie. Centimetru cu centimetru, din creștetul ras și până la umeri, neocolind dosul urechilor, ploapelor și aripioarelor nărilor, corpul îmi era cucerit de desene dureroase și fine, de florile artificiale, asemenea celor de gheață care înfloresc în nopțile geroase pe geamuri, ce curgeau, chinuitor de încet, din acul de metal cu care îmi martirizam pielea. Aceeași rețea de cerneală albastră, în care deslușeai toate peisajele lumii, toate obiectele dorinței și ororii, ca și chimere, ca și inscripții, ca și sentințe caligrafiate sinistru pe epiderma flexibilă, îmi ocupa și spinarea, pe care o încondeiam cu eforturi de fachir, marcându-i fiecare vertebră cu cât un soare, o șopârlă, un nor, un embrion, un ochi triunghiular și senin, iar omoplații cu aripi ambigue, cu ghiare de Archaeopteryx. Uitând să mănânc, să dorm și aproape și să respir, umplut cu totul de zeul de aur topit, pe care pielea îmi stătea ca pe un manechin din colțul croitoriilor, îmi tatuam cu migală, luni și săptămâni în șir, generoasele suprafețe termice, înnobilând cu arta mea cel mai greu organ al corpului meu. Cârceii cernelii au coborât cu încetul către piept, așezând pe coaste oboaie, cobre și corăbii, înconjurându-mi sfârcurile cu gurile căscate ale plantelor carnivore. Mi-am ornat pântecul cu bolți de catedrale încărcate de figuri alegorice, având ombilicul în centru, înconjurat de raze și porumbei. Mi-am gravat apoi pe sex și pe fese, demoni, grili și troli și orgii imunde. Am coborât cu acul de tatuaj pe pulpe, am gravat 2 gheparzi pe genunchi și rădăcini pe labele picioarelor. Fericit în suferința vie a pielii mele, simțeam că nu mai am limite, că totul mi se permite, că am încifrat acolo, în buclele, volutele, cupele și spinii tatuajului meu, algoritmul ființei și formula dumnezeirii. Umflate de suflul unei inspirații continue, desenele nici nu mai atingeau pielea, se desprinseseră de ea și levitau deasupra ei la câțiva centimetri, ca o pieliță de halucinație și de vis. Curând n-am mai găsit niciun centimetru pătrat pe care să pot înfi geacul, căci și tălpile, și palmele, și gingiile, și glandul, și unghiile îmi căzuseră deja, pradă luxurianței de junglă a tatuării. Am simțit atunci limita artei mele, care e și limita cunoașterii mele. Nu poți avea mai multă piele decât cea în care te afli. Nu poți tatua peste vechile tatuaje. Eram încă tânăr, aveam ani lungi înainte. Ce avea să fie viața mea fără singurul meu sens și singura mea bucurie? Nu se putea termina așa. Mi-a luat ani să desprind ideea de tatuaj de ideea de piele. Și atunci, terminând cu suprafața corpului meu, am coborât înăuntrul meu. Mi-am tatuat emisferele cerebrale, măduva spinării și nervii cranieni, numerotându-i ca pe planșele de anatomie. Mi-am tatuat plămânii, inima, diafragma, rinichii, acoperindu-le cu orașe necunoscute, telescoape, insecte și sisteme solare. Am micălit ani de zile la dantelele și plasele de păianjen cu care, ca un nou prapur, mi-am acoperit ghemul de intestine. Mi-am gravat oasele cu fraze din Coran, din Chebra Nagast și din scripturi. Mi-am tatuat traheea cu marele tablou al lui Aldorfer. Am caligrafiat pe vezică galaxii ținute împreună de nori de materie neagră. Iar când am fost gata, când scrisul meu mărunt, iluzionist, mi-a umplut trupul cu cea mai frumoasă poveste din lume, spusă de 1.000.000 de guri împreună, n-am mai căzut în melancolie, căci am știut odată că la fel ca și lumea insondabilă din prejur și la fel ca și corpul meu, care o reflectă ca o boabă de rouă, arta tatuajului e fără sfârșit. M-am îndreptat către granița dintre trup și spirit. Am trecut-o cu instrumentul meu de tortură în mâini și am început să-mi tatuez, știind că n-am să o epuizez niciodată, chiar dacă aș răni-o în veșnicie, infinita și infinit stratificata și infinit glorioasa și infinit dementa citadelă a minții mele.
so I won't suffer by comparison. I'm going to read a slightly different passage. And those of you that know both languages will be able to see the connections between the themes of these two. But this one has to do with him reflecting on, as you know from the plot of Solenoid, there's the moment where he reads his poem to the workshop of the moon, and they reject him, which is the exact opposite of what happened in real life, obviously. So we're dealing with the anti-novel here. If my poem, The Fall, had been well received by the workshop of the moon that distant November, today I would have maybe 10 books with my name on the cover, novels and poems and essays and academic texts. I might be in textbooks and invited to book fairs in distant Nordic countries. I might have been swept up in celebrity. I would have won the world the only way possible, through the loss, step by step, of my own soul. Weaving my sails from narrative cobweb, knitting my poems from gilding and tinfoil, acting out dramas that never happened, I would have forgotten that my skin is my body's heaviest organ, heavier than the brain or liver, and that the only respectable place to write is on your own skin. That no books are possible except those bound in your own skin, with living pages full of nerves, full of Gogli corpuscles and hair roots and sweat glands and tunnels teeming with mites. I would have forgotten the raw material from which clear drops of suffering were wrung, like liquid gold flowing from the lumbar puncture, the material from which Maldoror was created. I would have forgotten that a book, in order to mean something, must appear at a certain perspective. I would have written immanent, aesthetically autonomous works, which the reader would have looked at the way a cat looks at a finger pointing at the ball of yarn on the floor. But a book should be a sign, should tell you to go over there, or stop, or fly, or disembowel yourself. A book should demand an answer. If it doesn't, if your gaze ends on this ingenious, inventive, tender, wise, joyful, and wonderful surface instead of pointing you in the direction the book shows, then you have read a literary work and you have missed once again the meaning of any human effort to escape from this world. Novels hold you here, they keep you warm and cozy, they put glittering ribbons on the circus horse, but when, for God's sake, will you at last read a real book? At the last judgment, one will come and say, Lord, I wrote War and Peace. Another will say, Lord, I wrote The Magic Mountain, where the world depends on the sacrifice of a child. Another will say, Lord, I wrote over 80 novels and story collections. Another will say, Lord, I received a large international prize. Another will say, Lord, I wrote Finnegan's Wake, and only for you, because only you can read it. And another, Lord, look at 100 Years of Solitude. A better book was never written. They will come in droves, each holding his heaps of books, with sales figures and quotes from critics and press clippings, like the church fathers depicted the nows with miniature Ephesus in their hands. They will all be outlined in rainbows and energy. All their faces will shine like the sun. And the Lord will say to them, yes, of course, I read all of them before they were written. You gave people hours of enjoyment. You led them to meditations and to reverie. You painted the most amazing trompe-l'oeil, the most baroque, the most ornamented, the most massive portals on the smooth yellow bone of the interior of the forehead. But which of these portals ever actually opened? Which of these allowed the eyelid of the forehead to lift from the brain's eye? Which of these allowed the brain to actually see? Over on one side, humble in their rags, will be Kafka and Judge Schreber, Isidore Ducasse and Swift and Savato, Darger and Rizzori, along with 1,000 other anonymous writers, the writers of torn, burnt, frozen diaries buried in the rush of time. They will have empty hands, but letters scribbled on their palms. The master of all dreams, the great Issachar. After them will come millions of writers who only wrote with tears, with blood, with substance P, with urine and adrenaline and dopamine and ephedrine, directly onto their organs with ulcers of fear, on their own skin excoriated with ecstasy. Each of them will carry their own skin covered in writing, and from which the Lord, gathering them together between the cover of birth and the cover of death, will create the great book of human suffering. I would like this text to be that kind of page.
what is amazing, and I think we have witnessed just now, that this literature is somehow genre defining. It's quite difficult. Yeah, formally they may be novel, or because it's easier for us, we can call them novels. But in fact, it may be something else. What do you feel about your books? Do you think that they are part of a certain genre, or are you looking for a new type of genre? Something that will encompass, as you once, the name of one of your books, total, everything.
Well, I don't need a specific kind of a genre, because I already have one. I am a poet, and I will ever be a poet. Everything that I write is poetry. I think that this is the secret of my so-called novels, or stories, or short stories, or long short stories, and so on, which I think the public might know at this moment, that I never edit anything. I never erase words. I write all my books from the first word to the last word, even if between them there are 1,500 pages, like it's the case of Formentor, from a single thread of ink, because I write, usually I write by hand. So I don't write like the usual writer does, like the usual novelist does, by fabricating pieces of a book and then putting them together, as you fabricate a car or something like that,
or a house.
Or a house, yes. So I'm not doing like that. I don't have a plan. I never start with a synopsis of the book. So in the first chapter, my characters meet. In the second chapter, something happens and the plot starts to develop, and so on. I never know what I'm going to write on the second page. My way of writing is the way of writing of a poet, and not of a prose writer. I think this is a very big difference between me and many other writers. I would say the majority of prose writers, of fiction writers. I write a book, a thick book in the shape of a novel, as I would have written a poem, without anything that disturbs my inspiration. Because I believe in inspiration. I'm one of the very few writers in the world now that dares to say it. I believe in inspiration. I think, and it's my belief, that I have very little to do with my books. I have very little to do with them.
You're just like a medium.
Yeah, well, I'm just a portal, like a portal, I would say. I'm a portal by which my books come into this world, and I'm extraordinarily grateful for each and every one. I'm not proud of them, I'm grateful for them. It's a big difference. Because I feel that I, myself, I'm not able to write a book, actually. If I start to, if you give me a lot of money and say, please write a novel now, I wouldn't be able for no amount. Because each book of mine has its own life, and each book of mine knows when to come and when to appear in the world. Look, my process of writing is it's crazy. It's impossible, actually. It's like printing the card that we talked about, and not printing it with a 3D printer, and not assembling it on a line of assemblage, you know? It's like for the car being created, I print slices of the car, starting with the part in front of it, with the first slice, let's say, is has a bit of the front wheels, a bit of the carburetor, a bit of the carrosserie, I don't know the name in English. And then the second slide continues. Continues towards the end of the car, and each page is this kind of a slide having very different contents and sticking them together. This is how I write books.
But you are very disciplined, right? You wake up, go in your office and start writing. Every day, day after day, week after week, month after month, right?
Yes, I think you have to be disciplined to do anything, not only books and so on. Yes, I work only in the morning from 10 to 12 at most. I write very little in each session of writing, let's say. And each time I reread the last page that I wrote before and write in the same key, but without knowing what will happen on the page that I'm going to write.
Because you once said that you would be too bored to
Yes.
know what you're going to be.
This is what I wanted to add. You cannot tickle yourself. You need somebody else to tickle you. If you know where to put your fingers when you tickle yourself, you have no surprise, and do not laugh when tickling yourself. It's the same with the writer. If I knew what I will be writing on the next page, where is the surprise? No tickle, no nothing. So my greatest joy is to discover, like a poet, in each and every page, like a poet discovers in each and every verse, something that he didn't think before, something that was there, but not in his intentions, but in his mind, which is more clever, more talented, more wise than he is.
If you gave me $1 million, I wouldn't be able to write a book. So don't give me anything. But what about the translation process? Because you are great friends, you collaborate very closely, but you have a way to work with each other. Sean, tell us how this process of transferring this difficult prose, very lyrical, poetical, so many strange, becomes the English text that we all like, and because it's a magic that is very much comparable to the original.
There are certain similarities. I'm always envious of the blank page that Mircea has, right? When he sits down to work, he's waiting and kind of channeling what comes out of his mind. It's a constant surprise because he's always filling up a blank page. For me, I'm always faced with a printed page. I'm not at the moment of creation, I'm at the moment of recreation, where I'm taking the things that I see and putting them into a version of English. And I'm also jealous because he writes straight through. I have to do multiple drafts. I have to rewrite the book 4 times, 5 times. Solenoid I wrote four versions of. And but then there's also a great joy in that. Right? There's a great joy in getting to have such an intimate connection with these exceptionally beautiful pieces of writing. There's 2 teams in the translation world. There's team read first and team read a little bit, but then translate. To your first pass, somewhat cold. Michael Henry Heim, who's the great translator of Kundera and Chekhov and Max Blecher, he would do these preparations of a novel, where he would read the whole thing and make very detailed notes about the problems he could face. I'm not like that. I'm in team Be Surprised, and so I'm trying to kind of generate not the same experience by any means, but a parallel experience. And so this is a process where you read and you see all the 10,000 things that are happening in the text, and then you have to go and redo maybe 10 of them, so that you can put into the translation. So I'm constantly making choices. I'm constantly trying to figure out where's the heart of this scene, where's the heart of this character's voice, what is the tempo of this scene, where does this scene want to build, and how can I help that tempo to happen again in English. Right? So this is, my process is a process of interpretation, and the thing it looks most like is a kind of performance. Right? It's a kind of the way, it might seem like the way you take a musical score and bring it into your performance of that score, but really the score is not a good analogy, because the score isn't something that we experience until someone plays it, and obviously this book has its own existence. So what I think of it more is, I think of it as going to see a symphony with your friends, and then coming home and saying to your friends, hey, I'm going to try and play that again on my piano. Sure, they had a whole orchestra, but I've got 88 keys, surely that'll be enough. And then you do what you can. You have to try to make use of all the capacities of your instrument that are going to be different. English works differently than Romanian, but it's a deep engagement with the power and the beauty of that work. I'll say one thing, that this, apropos of Solenoid in particular, this was a book for me that the translation, as these things happen, happened during the pandemic. So I was literally at my table in the dining room at my laptop, facing my two daughters, both of them at their laptops. We all had headphones on, we were all unhappy. They had divided the table with blue tape into 4 quadrants, which means they left a quadrant also for my wife, but she was in a different room. She didn't want to have to deal with us, who were scowling at each other. But the experience of translating this book was the only thing that I could do. I couldn't do any kind of academic work or any kind of personal writing. I could just show up with that printed page and write a little bit from that printed page onto my laptop every day. And it was kind of like a rope that you use to pull yourself up a mountain. And little by little, I mean, we all have our experiences of the trauma of that time. Little by little, it was the encounter with the exceptional beauty of Mircea's prose that opened my heart back up again, right? And stopped my daughters and I from scowling, and gave me a little bit more patience for my daughters and a little bit more beauty in my life. And that's something for which I'll always be grateful.
Do you talk to each other when you translate about some difficulties in the text, or about words or sentences or meaning of a fragment, or it's just you working on the text?
I try not to bother. Mircea is also a translator, so he understands very well the whole process. I collect a number of queries. I might wait for those that add up over, say, 300 pages. And then I'll send an email. And with incredible speed and generosity for his time, Mircea responds with these things. There was one question that I had over the email that emblematizes, I think, our relationship, which was a long sentence, and you can believe it. It was a long sentence in the original, and with all of its beauty and all of its intensity. And I was working on bringing this rhythm into English, and I noticed that everything was a noun in this list of things. All the clauses were focusing on particular nouns, but there was one verb. And then we went back to nouns again. And if you have any OCD at all, this bothers you. And so I wrote to Mircea and I asked him, I said, here's the sentence in the original, here's my question about it. And he said, oh, Sean, poor you. Săracu de tine. And that's kind of been, and he said, we talked through the various solutions and we came up with something that would work. We kept the verb. But that attitude, I think, is really emblematic. That really, since Mircea understands the process of translation, he gives me the great privilege of kind of setting to the work and doing my job. Right? He's done his job, I do my job, and we both try to create something beautiful.
I think surely you did, as everybody recognizes. Well, in general, of course, you are introduced, as the great writer, the professor and translator, the multi-awarded writers and intellectuals. But I think that, and I have participated in several of your public events. I think people have talked less about the thing about an aspect of your work that I think is very important, because I know it and I experienced it from a very early age, which is mentorship. You are surrounded by disciples, by younger friends. You have, Mircea, you have taught all your life. You have nurtured generations of young writers with advice and with care. Sean, you have created in Dallas probably one of the most influential, or top 10 most influential translation schools and literature schools in America. So you have this aspect. What are you talking to? What is the most important thing you say to these young people? What do you want to convey? What are the most important messages that you feel you must convey to them?
First I would say that I do not feel celebrity. I do not feel a celebrity at all, and I don't care about it. I'm a very usual person, as you see me. I'm always the same. I talk to everybody absolutely the same. I don't have any wish of being a sort of a national guru, as many intellectuals struggle for it. And I'm living a normal life with my family, with my 4 cats who are now only 2, with my garden, with my home, and so on. I'm very happy to be everyone, to be everybody. The fact that starting from a very humble one-room place in Colentina, where I was born in a poor neighborhood in Bucharest, and arriving here in the middle of Manhattan, it was a long way, but I have always felt that I was a simple boy at the back of a block of apartment, as I was all my childhood. So I never forgot from where I started, and the fact that I got to teach at the university, I got to publish some books, I succeeded to be here with you in this wonderful evening. It's a miracle for me. For me, it's a miracle. I see it like something that I never thought of. I have to confess that I never wanted to become a writer. I never wanted it. Even now, I don't like this word. Because when somebody asks you, what's your field, what you're doing, and you say, I'm a writer, I think the other one feels a bit looked down, because he's not also a writer as I am. And I don't like to pronounce this word. I think it's too elitist, I don't know. It takes you out from the crowd, let's say. I prefer to be in the crowd, and I always preferred it. But in your life, there are some obligations, of course, that you have to do, not as obligations, but as things of joy, things of beauty, things of a noble obligation, if you want it. To take care of the youngsters, for example. I think it's absolutely normal, because you were taking care of some other people, and you have to transmit this kindness to others, this tradition of caring to transmit it to the next generations. It's only normal. What the critics that I told you about, did for me, I try to do for other people, for younger people. I think it's normal. As I was a part of the famous literary circle of Mandi that Nicolae Manolescu ran in the 80s, I wanted to have myself a sort of a circle for giving the youngsters the opportunity to grow, to develop as writers. And the fact that I had this kind of a literary circle in the faculty is one of my greatest motives of pride. I'm very proud of the people whom I had the chance to meet, who were writers but didn't know it by that time, and whom I helped to understand, to realize that they were writers. I worked for about 5-6 years with a group of writers, of young writers, about 15 people, and now they are all of them, so I was very lucky. All of them are established writers, among the most important names among the people of their generation. I think it's only normal. But you know, when I had this core, this circle, I really stayed in a circle. So I took the metaphor literally. We had the chairs around because I didn't want to be in front, be at the desk somewhere. I wanted to be one of them, and I was happy to have been accepted by them. Although I was 15 years older, I was so happy to be one of them, to go to parties with them, to share their lives and their literature. It was one of the brightest period of my life.
Yeah, because I know that very well. Why you're talking about how difficult it was for you to and how long the road was from a neighborhood in Bucharest to this room here in Midtown Manhattan, and how lucky you are. Trying to imagine how long it was for me to be here by your side. So I think it's the other way around, and I think everybody feels that tonight that we are very fortunate and lucky to share this evening with you. But Sean, you are surrounded by students. You are very particular about teaching, about nurturing them. How is your relationship with them? The more so, it's so important to nurture the next generation of Romanian literature translators.
I have a similar attitude of just being pleased to be around these people who are starting off in their careers and starting off in their world of ideas. The program at the University of Texas at Dallas is only for literature, so we only translate beautiful things. And therefore we also only work with, we don't work with professional translators who might actually make a living at it, unfortunately, for people who are there. So it's an academic program, it's a graduate program, it's a master's and doctoral students. And they're not all going to become very successful translators. They all do the work. They're not all going to become like they're with their career focused on this. And so sometimes the question is, what are you learning about, what are you learning through translation that's useful? And what you learn through translation is how to exist in this world where we are, all of us together here. I mean, New York is the best example of this that we can think of. The place where we're all coming from different languages and different cultures, and we need skills to talk to each other. We need skills to ask the right questions of each other. When I moved to Texas the first time, I'll tell this, it's a story on myself. I only knew this line from a former governor of Texas who was engaged in a debate about bilingual education, and Ma Rainey was her name. She said that she didn't want to have bilingual education in Texas. And why not? Well, if English was good enough for Jesus, then it's good enough for the state of Texas. Not even realizing she'd be reading a translation all that time. And so, if you don't have the attitude that that other people are coming from a different language and a different experience than you, then you are not always going to. Then you're going to have a much rougher time. You have a much rougher time in the world. And so I think that on the one hand, I'm working with students who need to be taught global literacy. Right? What are intelligent questions that you can ask of other people so that you don't impose from the get-go your own vision of the world upon them. And then this is actually more the case with my students. My students are the ones who are coming from all these different places. Some of them are first-generation students who speak one language at school and a different language at home, who are actually translating all the time for their parents. These are people who are doing the work of crossing cultures and need to have some vocabulary and some ideas just to guide them in the work that they're already doing. And that's the most exciting for me, is when we can bring someone into just a better conceptual network so that they can articulate the things that they're already good at and they're already doing, and they can be doing over and over and over again for the rest of their lives.
You give away a lot, but at the same time you receive a lot in this process, which I think it's very important. Let's hear another fragment. The book is available for purchase courtesy of Deep Vellum Publishing House, and we're going to talk a little bit about this relationship with a fantastic publisher and with a fantastic publishing house, Deep Vellum of Dallas, run by the great Will Evans.
I sometimes fantasize that I was once, in a dream or in another life, a tattoo master. So abstruse and so pure that no one ever had access to my art's wonders of lacy designs, of ink, and of paint. Shut in my room, alone in front of the mirror, I covered my skin with minute, crooked, overlapping, unreal arabesques, like the Nazca lines and the separating networks produced by mange. Centimeter by centimeter, from my shaved scalp to my shoulders, not avoiding the backs of my ears, my eyelids, or the wings of my nostrils, my body was conquered by painful, fine designs. Artificial flowers blooming like frost on the windows in windy nights, flowing in painful slowness from the metal needle with which I martyred my skin. This same network of blue ink, in which you could see all the landscapes of the world, all its objects of desire and of horror, like chimeras, like inscriptions, like sentences in a sinister calligraphy over the flexible epidermis. These also covered my spine, which I decorated, performing facure-like contortions, marking each vertebra with a sun, lizard, cloud, embryo, or a calm, triangular eye. And my shoulder blades with the ambiguous claw-tipped wings of Archaeopteryx. Forgetting to eat and to sleep, almost forgetting to breathe, filled with a god of melted gold, upon which my skin draped as if over a tailor's dummy in a corner of his shop. I tattooed my generous dermic surfaces with utmost care for months and weeks on end, ennobling with my art the heaviest human organ. Circles of ink descended bit by bit toward my chest, placing oboes, cobras, and cargo boats across my ribs, surrounding my nipples with the gaping mouths of carnivorous plants. I ornamented my stomach with cathedral arches teeming with allegorical figures, my navel surrounded in the center by sun rays and doves, and then I engraved my sex and buttocks with demons, gargoyles, and trolls and foul orgies. I lowered the tattoo needle to my thighs, and I engraved 2 cheetahs on my knees and roots on my feet. I was content in the living suffering of my skin. I felt I had no limits, that everything was possible, that I had encoded there in the curls, volutes, cups, and thorns of my tattoo the algorithm of being and the formula of divinity. Swollen with the breath of continuous inspiration, the patterns didn't touch my skin anymore. They peeled off and levitated a few centimeters above it. a skin made of hallucinations and dreams. Soon I couldn't find 1 square centimeter where I could stick the needle, because my soles, palms, gums, glands, and nails had already all fallen prey to the luxuriant tattoo jungle. I sensed the limit of my art at that point, and likewise the limit of my knowledge. You have no more skin than the one in which you find yourself. You can't tattoo over old tattoos. I was still young. I had many years ahead of me. What would my life be without my sole source of meaning and happiness? It couldn't end like this. It took me years to peel the idea of tattooing away from the idea of skin. And then, finished with the surface of my body, I descended within. I tattooed my cerebral hemispheres, my spinal cord, and my cranial nerves, numbering them like anatomical models. I tattooed my lungs, my heart, my diaphragm, and kidneys, covering them with unknown cities, telescopes, insects, and solar systems. I labored for years over the lace and spider webs with which, like a new peritoneum, I covered the knot of my intestines. I engraved my bones with verses from the Quran, the Kebra Nagas, and the Hebrew Scriptures. I tattooed my trachea with the great Altdorfer. I calligraphied my bladder with galaxies bound by clouds of dark matter. And when I was done, when my minute, illusionistic writing had filled my body with the most beautiful story in the world, told by a million mouths at once, I was immune to melancholy, because I suddenly knew that just like the unsoundable world around me, and just like my body reflecting it like a drop of dew, the art of tattooing is endless. I moved toward the border between body and spirit. I crossed it, holding my instrument of torture, and I began to tattoo myself, knowing I would never exhaust, even if I spent eternity wounding the infinite and infinitely stratified and infinitely glorious and infinitely demented citadel of my mind.
I'm going to open the floor now, because I'm sure that our wonderful audience that is struggling with the heat, with the cramped space, and very, very grateful those in the back who are so patient and standing. But not before I invite you to talk a little bit about the American experience of Solenoid. You have been translated before, right, in English, but I feel that only with Solenoid did you enjoy a true success. There was a book launching campaign, and we were proud to have been part of it throughout the United States. And then one of the most important prizes in America, the LA Times book prize, and then one of the biggest prizes in the English-speaking world in Dublin. The literary prize there. So something happened with Solenoid in terms of your reception in America and in the English-speaking world, for that matter. What happened? What magic did happen with this book? And now you have enjoyed wonderful reviews, prizes, admiration, book signing events that last for hours, because people are still coming to get your autographs. What happened?
Well, Solenoid was the breakthrough that I had waited for a long time. This breakthrough came rather late. It should have come with other books of mine. I think Orbitor, Blinding, would have deserved a better reception everywhere in the world. Well, it had always a success d'estime, as we say, but it didn't reflect in sellings and other things that matter very much for the publishers and so on. So although I struggled a bit to mean something in the literature of the world, it didn't happen. It didn't happen from many reasons. And the most important of it was what Wittgenstein said, that to like a poet, to really like a writer, you have to like the culture he's coming from, the country he's coming from. You have to know the background of that writer, and this actually does not happen always with the Romanian culture. The Romanian culture is still quite unknown in the world, and because of that, the writers cannot impose themselves very fast. Where a French writer, for example, or an American writer succeeds in 5 years, a Romanian writer succeeds in 30 years, or in 40 years, maybe, and with much luck, with much luck, I would say. And each and every writer, not only the Romanian ones, have two kinds of, I would say, terribly important persons in his career. The first is the translator, and the second is the publisher. You depend on those two people, on those two functions, let's say. A translator can create you and can destroy you. A good translator is gold for you, but a bad translator makes you ridiculous. Yesterday at the Harriman Institute, I told the story of my very first translation in French by a lady who seemed rather strange to me, but well, there was no other translator from Romanian that was available by that time. And she started to translate...
It was at the beginning of the 90s, right?
Yes. She started in 93. She started to translate Nostalgia, my first book of short stories. And I had the book was published in France, had very good reviews and so on. But when I started to read the book, I couldn't believe my eyes. Each and every page had a ridiculous misunderstanding. For example, on one page, a student, a pupil, a small child at school was eating bread roll under the desk, under his desk, not to be seen by the teacher. Mânca, in Romanian, I say it in Romanian, copilul mânca o japoneză pe sub pupitru. And she translated, the child was eating a communist Japanese under his desk. This is because a kind of a bread roll is called in Romanian a Japanese. And she interpreted it as a Japanese woman, maybe, who was a communist because the Japanese was red. It was very well done in the oven. So she went to the meaning of the word red, and the first meaning was communist by that time. Yes. So instead of a poor child who was cheating the teacher in school, it appeared a cannibal out of nowhere. And after that, on the next page, and there were hundreds of things like that, on the next page I was describing Palatul Telefoanelor, a sort of a small skyscraper built by the Americans between the wars. And I said, on the rooftop, there were some fiare. I meant the antenna, the parabolic antenna. And she translated c'était des fauves. Fauve in French mean wild animals, like
Beasts.
yes, beasts, like tigers, like panthers, like lions. So she said, on the rooftop of this building, there were lions, tigers, and so on. So it was a whole zoo on the rooftop of a yes. So a translator can be a god or a devil for a writer. And the second is the publisher. You are extraordinarily lucky if you find a good publisher in Romania, in my case, and abroad. It's very difficult, of course, to find a publisher abroad, because why should a publisher issue a book of someone from the middle of nowhere? Most of them, not only in America, but in Europe too, don't know anything about the Romanian culture, of course, except some big names that we all know. So why would he publish you? You have to be extremely lucky to find one who, because it happened that he read a bit your manuscript before throwing it into the basket. Maybe he found something interesting and he dared to publish the book, knowing that he will get no reward from it. He will get no money. He will get nothing. The book won't sell. And why the public would buy this kind of a book? Why would a French person would buy a certain Cărtărescu? He can not even spell my name, and coming from a strange, different culture, talking maybe about local history that nobody knows and nobody cares, and so on. So it's terribly difficult to find a publisher abroad, mainly in the West, where the validation is actually. And it's a miracle, as you say, to find a real publisher who really believes in you. The secret of a good publisher is enthusiasm. A publisher who does issues a lot of books, but shows no enthusiasm for them, won't sell them, because enthusiasm is contagious. It's contagious. If you not show your public that you really love that book, the public won't buy it. But if you do everything you can to convince the public to buy the book will be bought and will be read with pleasure. So I was incredibly lucky to have found some wonderful publishers abroad. The first one, there are many, but the first one was Enrique Redel in Spain, a man to whom I owe a lot, because my first successes were in Spain and in the Latin America. Yes, and the second and the first ex aequo is Will Evans. I was very lucky to have found him. Actually, he found me. He had the generosity to read the books, my previous books published in the States, Nostalgia with New Directions and Blinding with Archipelago. And it happened that he liked those books, and when he liked them, he exploded. He's an explosive person. You know him. He's a sort of a, he cannot live in reality. He's a sort of a character from cartoons. He's like Pancho Gonzalez or like that coyote in the cartoons. He explodes anytime he likes something, from whiskey to literature. He's so happy. You can feel happiness in his eyes. And when I gave him Solenoid, he felt, because he's a great publisher, he felt that this book has potential, and he did everything that one can imagine and even more for the book, for promoting this book, and he was rewarded.
That's why we didn't invite Will, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to utter any word. He would have, taken over the whole conversation. But no, he was very much like an invitee, and he wished he could have come. But it's important to say that Sean, you know him very well. You live in the certain, you live in, I don't know, 50 miles away from each other, and both in the Dallas area. He has created in a couple of years the biggest publishing house of translations in America. I mean, it's really phenomenal. Starting from a small publishing house, small press, now he publishes more translations than any other big publishing house in America. He's influential, he's crazy about his authors, he's crazy about his books, he fights for them like crazy, and he's a real character. I think not only you are lucky to have Will, I think all the Romanian culture is happy to have him as the publisher who cares about Romanian literature and promotes it and will translate it. And by the way, a small note. Yeah, as an author, you need 30 a Romanian author, you need 30 years to to get ahead. But that's before Romanian Cultural Institute. Now it's only 15. Sean.
Absolutely.
It does, you say that in an offhand way, but it's really true, right? That I am the envy of my translator colleagues for the support that you've given and continue to give for Will Evans and for the tour, for Ioana and Mircea as they went through the United States. I mean, a lot of the success, all that excitement has to do with people coming in to see them, to hear, and a night like this, right? And that happened because of your support. So that's something that really should be recognized. Yeah. And Will Evans is just a tattooed firecracker. That's all you have to say about him.
So I'm sure there are questions, comments. Just keep the microphone closer to you.
Thank you so much for coming and being with us tonight. First, constructive feedback for the Institute. Some books would have been nice to have outside, like maybe Theodoros, maybe like more books, maybe have like, I don't know, bookstore downstairs with Romanian books. It's such a great location here that I feel like it would be a great thing to have to promote.
Tell my bosses. So,
Thank you.
Open a bookstore downstairs, okay? It's for the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's for the camera.
Yep. And for Mr. Cărtărescu, they say that life is too short to read bad books. I have 3 small children. They're 2, 5, and 8. And my 8-year-old, he's a boy. He's an avid reader. He loves to read. When he says he's bored, I say find a book, and then he goes and finds a book. But he's very into comic books, like every boys at his age. What can I do to get him to get him to read the good books, the books that will influence you for life, and that would give you that, I don't know, wisdom that you find in books.
Wonderful question, and thank you for the suggestion.
I have more.
We'll talk later.
I also thank you for your very thoughtful question. It's one of the biggest problems because most of us we are educated people and we learn how to read a book, and not only how to read a book, but we learn the fact that without reading books, we are less interesting as persons. We are less complex people. As I said yesterday night, there are people that have a good life without reading books, without going to concerts of classic music, of rock music, without going into museums and so on. But they don't know what they lose. They don't know what they lose. If they did this kind of things, besides other pleasures of life, let's say, they would have the chance of being wiser people, people who would be more satisfied in life, in my opinion. I think that losing the classical culture, let's say, it's a great loss for the younger generations. And I think that it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy that many youngsters abandoned, in a way, reading books and doing the other cultural things that define the high culture. But not everybody. I think there are still chances. I've seen many times children reading. I've seen that the books for children are among the most successful books which are still sold in a great number. So I never lose hope. Maybe they will receive another kind of literature, another kind of books and so on. But I still think that the habit of reading is fundamental, because reading, in opposition with the other arts, has this feature that it implies a lot of involvement from the receptor, from the public, from the audience. To read a book is an intellectual effort. To see a movie, maybe it's not just like that. You can be passive. You can assist passively to a movie. But you have to rewrite the book that you are reading. You rewrite it in your mind. You appropriate it. You make it yours by a very complicated process of recreating, reinterpreting what the writer had to say. This is why I think that we should teach our children to read by our example and by all means, without torturing them, without imposing anything to them, without being authoritarian. But by your example. If a child sees you reading, he will read or she will read. But if you never read and you only browse on your iPhone, the child will do the same. I was happy to write only one book for children, the Encyclopedia of the Dragons, a book that I love very much, and I recommend it to your children and to anyone's children, because it's a book where I put my whole fantasy. It's a book that has no flesh in a way. It's only fireworks of joy, fireworks of imagination, and so on. I think I think it's one of the best imaginative books that I wrote.
I think we have another important writer of children books, and not only children books, in the audience, and that's Ioana Nicolae. Ioana is true bestseller in Romania with her books, wonderful characters. And he will engage with her American audiences, also here in New York at the European Literature Night, together with many European, I think 7 or 8 European authors. So on 24th, follow us on our social media, and you'll learn about that. So, other questions? Yeah. Other question. Over there. Yeah. Here you are. And then I'm going to go over there. Yeah?
Well, good evening. First of all, thank you for organizing this, Dorian, and for bringing, yes.
Yeah, closer the mic. Yeah.
And for bringing in front of us these brilliant people. Thank you, Mircea, for just bringing to us this wonderful pieces of what I will call it, and Sean for bringing the Romanian books right to the English-speaking folks here in the United States. The question is going to be to you, Sean, and I had a chance to be part of another event organized. For the love of me, I still don't understand how you picked up Trai de Curte Veche, to translate it. That's a very archaic, language, and clearly picking up easy books, that's, translate, that's not your criteria. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you pick up those books. And then going back to what Mircea had said before, have you had any instances when translating the book, you came up with some, here's my translation, and Mircea basically said, oh, kind of, what the heck is this? Kind of like the analogy with the animale that, on top of the palatul telefonului. So, were there any instances like that?
I am terrified that my translations are full of instances like that we just haven't discovered yet. The process, different books work in different ways. Trai de Curte Veche was what you call a passion project. It was a book I just wanted to do, mostly because people told me it was impossible to do. And some of my Romanian friends said, it's fantastic that you're translating Trai de Curte Veche. Are you translating it into Romanian? Because I've always wanted to read it. So that's a book I worked at. It was about 10 years that I had to take that from its beginning, and it's not even that long of a book. But it was a process of investigation. And my background is in some of the same authors that Mircea's background is in. My academic preparation is in modernism and continental modernism. And so to read a book from 1928, part of me just wanted to bring that, to apply the things I'd learned about that period of literature and bring it into another version, into the English version. The one thing that ever happened, it didn't happen with Mircea, but there was one time when I was working through a manuscript with a Romanian poet who is she's also a translator, and she spent a lot of time in the United States. The book was called Light Wall, and we were working through the manuscript together, and I was so proud, right? Because I was going over there and I was like, look what I did. And she found a passage and she said, Sean, this is very beautiful what you've written here, but it's not exactly what I said. And at that moment I wished the earth would open up, would swallow me whole, and I would never be heard from again. And then she said, but I kind of like your version better. And I'm going to change the Romanian text to match your translation. At that moment, the earth swelled up, and I was on top of the mountain. So yeah, these changes are part of translation. Translation changes everything is the name of a book on translation, and that's just a beautiful process to be part of.
Hi, Domnul Cărtărescu. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you, RCI as well, for hosting. I had a question specifically about how your book, now that it's gotten more acclaim and is read by a wider group of audiences, if you think that there's been any like misunderstandings or misconceptions about the book. I'm sure not because of the translation, Sean did an excellent job, but more because of cultural differences or just things that you wish that the audience got from the book, or you don't understand how they're seeing the book in a certain way. And in the same light, in a more positive light, if there's anything that people have found in the book that surprised you as you released it to the wider audience.
It's really a very interesting question. When you are a writer less known, having only a few aficionados for your work, when you are a niche writer, as they call them, you are more you rely more in the way those people are reading your book. You trust them more because they are a small group around your works, and they dig it. They dig it, as we say. They understand it. They can. It's a sort of a I don't know, a commerce between you and them.
Complicity.
A sort of a complicity. But I'm a niche writer. I still consider myself a niche writer, not for many. I don't want to be published in hundreds of thousands of copies. Instead, I love to be read by people who really understand and love my books. And I want to tell you that I'm very happy to have a few circles of readers around my works. One of them is a blog in the Spanish-speaking world. It's a blog called Araña Mariposa e Solenoide, which consists in 1,400 people who read day by day news about my books, about my world, about my reviews and so on. And they are very, very close to me. They know my books very well, and they spread the news, let's say, about them. And also in the Spanish-speaking world, and mostly in the Latin America, I have another group, which is called Las Piquetistas, a group of enthusiasts, aficionados, as I said, who also who took this let's say admiration for my works a step further. So they started to act in the real life pages from my books, scenes, happenings from my books. They call themselves Piquetistas because in Solenoid there are some people who protest against the worst things that can happen to us, from madness to death to accidents to diseases and so on. They protest as if they were people who protest against the war in Vietnam or something else, with signs where they write down with the death, down with the madness and so on. And they do these things in the real life. They went in front of hospitals, of the morgue, and other places, sinister places, with the signs where they write down with the diseases, down with the death, and so on. So it's an example of how literature influences the real life, instead of being the other way around. and I love to be surrounded by this kind of people. But when you start to reach a larger audience, things start to degrade, because in the tens of thousands of people who read your books, you will find people who misunderstand the book, people who don't like the book, who even hate the book, and so on. And they not only hate the book, but write on the Facebook, on the Instagram, how much they dislike the book. So you start to have not only good surprises, but also some 2 or 3 bad surprises, which is bearable in my opinion. I can live with it.
I'm sure in this audience there are only good surprises. Of course, it's important, always important what's happening on this stage, but I should say that it's also always very important what's happening behind this stage. And I like to take the opportunity to thank my team that has worked very hard to put together this event, and I want to single out Andrea, our literary programmer, but also Luisa, Andrea, Dana, Marcella. They have done wonderful things to be able to offer events like this, and I'm very, very grateful to them. Also struggling with the chairs, you know, and with but you know, success has its price. Now I see that we have been talking for 2 hours, and I'm sure you know, we can continue this conversation over a glass of wine, as I'm told that the white wine is beginning to boil. So yeah, we gotta do something about it. And also you can have Mircea's autograph. We have prepared a special place in the gallery, and in the meantime you can admire our exhibition about our 55 years of existence, because this year the Institute has 55 years since it was created. But of course, not before we say that it's been a fantastic evening and a fantastic conversation. And please join me in showing how wonderful it was.
And if you allow me, dear Dorian, not before thanking you so much, you and your team, your wonderful team in the Romanian Cultural Institute in New York, for the extraordinary and friendly and warm help that you were for me, not only on this occasion when I'm invited in New York by the Columbia University, but also last year when we had the tour together, and when we shared actually this tour with you from the West Coast to the East Coast in a fantastic adventure. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Mircea. And I swear Mircea and Ioana didn't miss the plane because of us. It was the taxi driver that did it. This is also for the record. So thank you, Mircea. Thank you, Sean. You are wonderful. And I can't wait for the time when we meet again at the Institute with the new book in English. I hope it's going to be out soon. Thank you all for being here tonight. It's the perfect way to start the weekend at the Romanian Cultural Institute. Thank you. Book signing in the gallery.